Welcome to this interregional webinar series on engaged universities. We welcome this audience from all around the world. We have more than 300 registration from more than 60 countries in Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, and Europe. You are most welcome to join us today in this first webinar of this series on engaged universities. Let me introduce myself. My name is Marina. I am from Argentina. I work at Obreal. Obreal is based in Barcelona. It's turning 20 this year. This is an interregional cooperation association that brings together universities and associations of universities in Europe, in Latin America, and the Caribbean, in Africa, in the Middle East, in India, and in Asia. We have a vision of building a sustainable interregional South-South-North political dialogue to foster cooperation in higher education and related matters based upon mutual respect and knowledge sharing to promote interregional cooperation in different realities with institutions that have different profiles and that have different policy approaches to development issues. Obreal is committed to working in a cross-sectoral, multilingual, and cooperative manner to create innovative, joint, and interregional solutions to the pressing development challenges that we share, that are common to various regions in the North and in the South. So our main axes are the policy dialogue, the capacity building, the knowledge production, and all these issues. And to complement and to go further on this, we invite you to watch the overall video, which has been listed as a resource on the training platform where the materials for this series will be made available. This interregional webinar series is a perfect expression of our work at Obreal and of our partnerships. One of our main partners in Africa is SARUA. SARUA is the Southern African Universities Association, with which we have just launched a very strategic Erasmus Plus project, a capacity building project called Engage SDGs, that is supporting this webinar series. This series complements and draws from and gets inspiration from all the work that's being undergoing on the Engage SDGs capacity building project. And we invite you also to look at the website of this project and enjoy the work that this consortium is doing. This series, this webinar series, is also part of our roadmap to the upcoming interregional policy dialogue on higher education and development that we are co-organizing in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, in the month of July. Obreal organizes together with the African Union and the CELAC, which is the communities of Latin American and Caribbean states, these interregional policy dialogues on education and development to bring together decision makers and academics to jointly think about the shared solutions to our common challenges. And regarding the structure of this series, this is the first of 5 webinars. The 5 webinars will be connected in a series as 5 modules. These webinars will collect experiences, practices, best practices, particularly from Latin America, Africa, and Europe. So you will hear the voices and the perspectives of 3 regions in every webinar. Each webinar includes also learning materials, a live webinar like this one, and a feedback and reflection quiz that will be available in the training platform after every synchronous webinar. In the series, you will hear a mix of contextualized and theoretical interpretations and concepts on each and one of the 5 topics. You will hear examples, you will hear case studies, and you will debate with other members, with other participants, and that is why we invite you to be very active, to please share your questions, your comments, give us your inputs, your contributions on the chat box throughout, which will be read out as we move ahead with the webinar. On a more operational, but very important aspect, let me tell you that you will be invited to take a short reflection quiz after each session. If you choose to complete the path of the 5 sessions, of the 5 webinars, which we hope you do, you will be able to request a certificate. So if you want to get the certificate, the quiz after the webinar is a mandatory issue. So with no much further ado, thank you for your engagement. Thank you for being part of this group of marvelous and enthusiastic people who firmly believe that interregional dialogue and that interregional approaches can be the key to finding shared solutions to common pressing developmental challenges. It is a joy for me to see so many friends from all over the world. So enjoy this interregional adventure and keep tuned for future opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marina. From my side, welcome to everyone here that I know and that I don't know. It's fantastic to listen to my colleague Marina speaking from Barcelona in Europe, while I'm sitting in Somerset West, Cape Town, South Africa. And we all speak the same language because we all share our concerns about the universities and how we can help universities to be engaging. And I think first and foremost, us here today should agree that the engaged university doesn't start out there. The engaged university starts here with the extent to which we engage about the engaged university in this webinar. So I represent SARUA, the Southern African Regional Universities Association, which is a membership-based organization in the Southern Hemisphere of Africa, made up out of almost 61 member universities, both public and private, across the SADC, the Southern region. And our vision is to provide the power of the network in terms of creating innovation for the higher education sector as a whole. And as part of that, we have become friends, partners with Aubriel some years ago. And I've got to know most of the Aubriel people in this network because of the work that we do. So I'm Renee Pelletier. I'm the Strategic Focus Area Leader for Knowledge Co-Production, which is one of 4 strategic focus areas that SARUA has to ensure that the work we do is innovative, inclusive, and available to all the universities in the Southern Hemisphere. I'm also the project manager for the Engage SDG project that Marina was referring to. And while we were conceptualizing the Engage SDG project, which is a 3-year capacity development project with an outcome to develop a framework for participatory approaches, which is a research technique or a series of techniques that support engagement for the universities. As we were conceptualizing the project a year ago, more than a year ago, the issue around the engaged university came to the fore. And we started actively engaging with the material at the time about the engaged university, what it means, how is it derived. And at the heart of the project, Engage SDG, lies the concept of being the engaged university, which comes with a lot of challenges, but it also comes with a lot of hope for the communities that we serve. From my perspective, in knowledge co-production, the value of the university lies in its context to its environment. And for every university, probably that context is different because of the situatedness of the university. So what we're trying to do with our webinar series is to develop that engagement around engaged universities, because there is no one size fits all. We will walk away here today probably with a joint understanding of how the regions differ and how the regions are the same. And I'm encouraging every one of you as we move through our discussions to think deeply about what you take away from this. Why is this model important? How does it operate within the Latin American universities, within the SADC universities, within the European universities? What can we share from each other? How can we contribute to the debate around this? And where do we go from here? So, first things first. Engaged university really, for me, is a requirement for a university to play a more active role in society and focus on the interactivity of knowledge and working with knowledge in the context of working together, collaborations, and mutual learning. And as we were building this interregional dialogue series, we tried to understand what do we mean by the webinar series, and we came to the realization it is to facilitate for you, for every one of us and for you, the in-depth interregional discussions and knowledge sharing about engaged university. So how do we explore the integration of societal engagement with the core academic activities that universities normally pursue? How do we relate with their local communities and build meaningful relationships? How do we explore the institutional conditions to integrate the work that we do within the society around us? So that's the focus of what lies within our webinar series, which Marina reminded you is 5 in total, of which this is the first one. So ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you to the first of the 5 events that we will be hosting within May and June. You'll see they're coming quickly, the one after the other, because we want to build energy, enthusiasm through what we are going to host. So what we will be dealing with today would be, how do we define the engaged university within different regional contexts? What is crucial for us to discuss in this interregional discussion? What successful models are we aware of from our speakers' points of view that we can share between Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa? What are the challenges and the enablers that will allow us to promote deeper societal engagement in the different regions and across the different regions? So just to share with you, you should be proud that you're participating today and over the next 4 interregional dialogues. As one of these countries mentioned here, we registered 321 participants over 60 countries for these events. And that for me is the nature of engagement, that we can come together for 2 hours to speak about something that changes how we feel about our communities and the work that we do in the universities. So I now have great pleasure to introduce the speakers for today's event to you. So the first one for me is Professor José Franz. Professor Franz holds a PhD and she's the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation at the University of the Western Cape in South Africa. Professor Franz completed her PhD in physiotherapy at the University of the Western Cape in 2004. She's an established researcher with an NRF-C2 rating, enjoying international recognition for her work in areas like chronic diseases, HIV/AIDS, health professions, education, and research capacity development. Professor Franz has published over 100 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters. Her work has been supported by prestigious grants from organizations like the South African National Research Foundation, the European Union, and the Norwegian government. She has supervised well over 45 masters and 20 doctoral students to successful completion. She is deeply committed to teaching and faculty development. She's obtained awards like the South African Education Leadership Award and the SAAHE Distinguished Educator Award. She's actively involved in national and international organizations and editorial boards promoting health professions education. Jose's leadership roles include serving on advisory boards for centers like Caprisa Plus and the Dalla Omas Institute. She's a member of the USAF, which is the South African Universities Association Research and Innovation Strategy Group, and the International Professional Recognition Council for Research Management. We welcome here today Professor Jose Frans. I'm also going to introduce the other members of the panel to you, and then I'll allow the speakers to have their words to you. Second speaker is Dr. André Herzog. André is Senior Advisor and former Deputy Secretary General of the European Universities Association. He works and advises universities and governments internationally on a wide range of higher education policies. Her publications have focused on diversity and inclusion, student access and success, university governance and strategy, quality assurance, internationalization, doctoral education and academic careers, and community engagement. She holds a licence et lettres in political philosophy from the Université Paris 1 Panthéon-Sorbonne and a PhD in anthropology from the University of California in Berkeley. We welcome Dr. Herzog to the meeting today. Next person is Professor Ellen Hazelkorn. She will be jointly presenting with the previous speaker. She's joint managing partner for BH Associates Education Consultants, Professor Emeritus from TU Dublin, and joint editor Policy Reviews in Higher Education. She worked with and advised international organizations and governments as well as universities for well over 20 years, including the European Commission, the OECD, the World Bank, UNESCO, and was Vice President of TU Dublin from 1995 to 2015. Ellen has published almost 200 peer-reviewed articles, book chapters, short articles, and blogs, commentaries, policy papers on higher education and civic regional engagement. Welcome, Ellen, to our conversation. And last but not least, our academic coordinator from Colombian Association of Universities, Professor Elizabeth Bernal-Gamboa. Professor Gamboa is the academic coordinator of the Colombian Association of Universities and a professor at Université Nacional de Colombia. She has been expert advisor, researcher, project management, and academic administrator in higher education with universities, consulting firms, and the Convenio Andrés Bello, and with the Ministry of National Education. She has also taught at this university in the fields of anthropology, political science, and research. Her most recent publications deal with the topics of university management and the 2030 Agenda. She's also published about the related challenges of education and social mobility in Latin America, management of international strategies for higher education in Latin America and the Caribbean, management of quantitative information in universities, prospective plans for universities, the reform of higher education policies in Colombia, and quality assurance and management for higher education institutions, as well as publications about anthropology in Colombia. So with that, I would like to welcome our speakers. And at this point, I just wish you all the best. And I'm going to hand over first and foremost to Professor Jose Frans. And once she has completed, we'll do 4 minutes of discussion, and then I'll hand over to the other speakers. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. A warm applause silently for Professor Jose Frans.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to Abriel and Sarua for inviting me to be part of this panel discussion. I'm just going to try and share my screen quickly, and then I will start so that I don't hold up the process. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm going to speak about the Engaged University and just to understand why it's important for us to be thinking around this concept of an engaged university. It is not a new concept, but it's not a concept that is written about very often. And so I thought I'd start off by talking about what is the definition that we can talk about for an engaged university. And when I started to search for this, it became very obvious that this is not something that has been written about quite often. But let me just cite a quote, just our previous speaker, who spoke about an engaged university and what it means for us to be an engaged university. As she mentioned in her opening and welcome this afternoon, she talks about a university that addresses the needs and challenges of its surrounding communities and wider society. And we're talking about making an impact on society. And this is through our research, through our teaching and learning, and through our community engagement. I can only speak from our context in terms of what it is that we do. And for us at the University of the Western Cape, community engagement facilitates community opportunities that enhance and promote the scholarship of engagement through equitable partnerships and citizenry to promote, this thing's in the way, equitable and citizenry to promote sustainable communities. So what does this mean for us as a university? It means that we need to be, community engagement forms part of our value system in terms of what we do as an institution. And later on in the presentation, I will explain to you why this is so important for us. So defining engagement, engagement encompasses collaboration, partnerships, and community involvement. It involves fostering meaningful relationships and leveraging expertise to address real-world challenges. Very clearly here, it articulates to us that it's not the university that comes with the answers. It is actually partnerships, and the community itself can also come with the answers, because we're talking about equitable partnerships here. And therefore, when we talk about an engaged university and we're talking about partnerships and we're talking about key stakeholders, then we need to realize that there's equal opportunity for everybody and equal voice for everybody in terms of this engaged university that we're talking about. So let me just highlight something here around the South African context. In South Africa, the pillars of higher education talks about teaching, and I've mentioned that research has become important for us in terms of how we're doing this. And in 1999, it was stated by Kellogg, a commission report stated, higher education institutions worldwide make substantial contributions to human resource development and knowledge production by the nature of their status as teaching, learning, and research institutions. But they have made little progress in the area of building meaningful partnerships with their local communities other than simple outreach and service. This was a very bold statement to make, and this was way back in 1999. So what have we as a country done to look at this? The response by the South African Higher Education and Training Department was that we had a policy in our 1997 South African Higher Education Policy White Paper. Community engagement was in the paper, and it stated that it required higher education institutions to demonstrate social responsibility, not just have it as part of their vision, but to demonstrate how they are contextualizing and how they are operationalizing social responsibility. In 2001, the National Plan for Higher Education maintained that universities need to be responsive to local, regional, and national needs. And then most universities in South Africa acknowledge the role that social responsibility and active citizenship play, but have different views about the extent and development of such programs. And therefore, the importance of this webinar this evening to talk about how is it different in different regions, when we are even speaking South Africa, that it's different in different institutions. And so there were several papers that have been written about what it means to be an engaged university. And there was a paper in 2018, and then there was this article, I think was also written in 2020. But the key recommendations that come out of it is that an engaged university should endeavor to nurture and develop the multiple systems of community which it serves, not only the individuals within these communities. And that says a lot for what we're needing to do. And then it says engagement needs to be mindful of negotiated and renegotiated power dynamics, both within and between the multiple communities and contexts. And this for us as higher education institutions should be important, because normally higher education institutions are seen as ivory towers, and we tend to, or there's this perception out there that we want to come into communities with the answers. Yet we need to understand that communities have their own answers, and we need to work together to find solutions for the problems that they are facing. And so for meaningful engagement to ensue, scholars must authentically engage themselves with the concept and process of engagement. It's not just a word that we're needing to use as a common word that's out there, but it's something that we really need to engage with and think about how we are doing this. And I hope I'm going to get to that by the end of my presentation. Higher education here in South Africa had decided that this is, the engaged university is an important concept that we're needing to unpack. And in 2022, we had a conference where we spoke about this as a theme, covering teaching and learning, community engagement, and research in the various aspects. And it was an opportunity to interrogate the ways in which engagement shapes the relationship between universities and society, and more importantly, how it impacts the knowledge project that we are engaged with. And so the engaged university focuses on 4 key aspects that I want to mention: engaged teaching, social or societal impact, economic development, and global engagement. And we need to address all 4 of these aspects if we are going to be seen as the engaged university that we are wanting to speak about. And so the demand for a stronger presence in society through proactive engagement and partnering with our societal actors is real. It's real, it has been documented, it's there for us to have to engage with, but how we engage with it is important, and how we define ourselves, and this word in community engagement is also important. So the call to action for a framework for engagement is very clear, that it is obvious that we're needing to talk about that. And so as we address the needs of society, we need to think, how will universities embrace engagement as a core mission in their institutions? So there's this article that was written by Randriga Peer, which talks about what influence universities' regional engagement. And he gives a table where he unpacks various factors that contributes to it in terms of organizational level, that is within the institution, regional level, and then also organizational field level, which is the broader higher education sector. And we need to look at all of these factors if we are going to be talking about what this engaged university means for us and how we are going to unpack that. Then we have Boyer's model of scholarship. And Boyer's model of scholarship also gives us a framework to talk about this engaged university, because they talk about the scholarship of teaching, the scholarship of discovery, the scholarship of integration, and the scholarship of application. In all 4 of these scholarships, there's a link and a connectivity in terms of how we do what we do, and when we do it, and with who we do it. And these frameworks allows us a space to be able to interact in a way that is purposeful and that gives meaning to what we as a higher education institution is meant to do, our purpose, and how we impact society. So for me, I want to say that in order for us to make progress, we need to co-design and co-produce knowledge, but we need to understand our own context. We cannot do it. For example, I drive the SDGs at the University of the Western Cape, but we need to understand that the SDG is but a framework. We need to apply our own spin or our own context to what it is that we are achieving within that. Universities can be the vehicle to drive cross-sectoral knowledge. That is why we're talking about how does this engaged university look like in different regions. We realize that co-production doesn't necessarily equate to equity. Co-production does not necessarily equate to equity. Equality and equity is different. We need to speak of equity as it recognizes that each person has a different reality and different circumstances, and we need to meet people at their point of need when we talk about this engaged university. And we need to have influential conversations within the context of diversity and equity as we look at the SDGs through different lenses. Schulman 2005 says to us that in terms of unpacking this engaged university, there's the surface structure, and that is research and academic and community engagement activities leading to understanding of our individual institutions' identities and how we focus on that. It then takes it a step further, and it says the deeper structures is others as an engaged university. How is it entrenched in our curricula, in our policies, in our ranking systems, our accreditation bodies? So we take it out of UWC and we take it to a broader context in terms of what it is that we are wanting to do as an engaged university. And finally, the implicit structure is what is the moral foundation of our institutions? What is the moral foundation of an engaged university that we are wanting to see as we move on? How are our institutions situated relative to society and other institutions? But what does this mean for us in terms of our value system? These are key questions that we need to engage with when we talk about an engaged university model. And I want to talk about the motivation for an engaged university model. The engaged university concept has gained significant traction in recent years, and it reflects a shift in the role and responsibilities of higher education institutions. We need to actively engage with and contribute to the social, economic, and cultural development of our regions. And it is thus essential that this engaged university model is addressed, and the growing demand for universities to be more responsive to the needs of their local and regional communities. And so when we talk about this engaged university and looking at it interregionally, it is crucial for us to understand best practice, provide innovative approaches, but also realize that it will be context specific in terms of how we drive this. And I want to talk about just UWC, and I just want to give you this context as I end off. When we talk about UWC, UWC finds itself located within South Africa, and we can say within the broader Cape Town. And Cape Town is third world and first world in the space of 20 kilometers away from each other. And this for us is what is important. Just 20 kilometers, there's the high-flying, beautiful Table Mountain, beautiful housing. And then we have our communities, our disadvantaged communities where our students come from, which is depicted in the bottom of this picture. And for me, it is about making sense of when these students come into our higher education institutions like UWC, how do we get them to the level where they are able to engage in the top half of that picture, moving them out of this socioeconomic status down here below and moving them to the next level. That is what it means to become an engaged university through embedded culture of sense making and understanding what it is that we are wanting to do. For us at UWC, the concept of the SDGs and leave no one behind is integrated in our value system, where we talk about inclusivity and diversity, collegiality and collaboration, and engagement and response. And if we look at those terminologies, it talks to what an engaged university should look like. So I hope that I have been able to trigger some of your thinking around what an engaged university should be. And the take-home message is that we need to consider the context in which each university finds itself. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose. I've made some notes here, but you went so quickly into so much stuff. I couldn't write everything down, and I wish I did. I wish I could. Thank you. Colleagues, are there any comments or questions for our speaker? If you can just raise your hand, then I'll see who it is, and I'll give you an opportunity to speak. Or if you want to just post something in the chat, I can look at that. Garden is asking, are you getting the slides? Yes, I believe this will go to Aubriel's learning management system, Garden, so you can get that from there. But wait till we're finished. Any other? So I was listening to you, and then from my perspective to say, it is about addressing the needs and the challenges of society. So the university almost needs to open its borders. And then you were talking about positive impact. And then I'm like, so how do you measure that impact? How do we know that the society around us is now happier than they were before? Take your last slide. So UWC has in its vision, in its institutional planning, that that's what you want to do through the 8 goals. So how do you know that the community is happy? Over to you.
So for me, I think it's important that we clearly define what is meant by community. And so for us, it is in terms of our students. Our students come from that community. I did not include it in this presentation, but just recently we have a statue at the front as you come into our university up to go to the main Jakes Gerwel Hall, where there's a statue of a cleaner standing with a broom, and there's a statue, and next to the cleaner is a student graduating. And that is the impact that we are trying to make in society. And just at our recent graduation, we had children of our staff, our cleaning staff, graduating, and they were able to, they were marched from that statue to the main hall to where this event was going to take place. Are you still hearing me?
Yeah, clearly. Thank you.
Have
No, we can hear you.
So Renee, I think that, it is evident in what we are doing right there on the campus that we are making an impact in society, because those same students are going to go back into the community.
Thank you. Then I have 2 comments here, which I'm going to read to you. The first one comes from Monica Alvarez, and she's saying how to focus on the creation of capabilities in our communities instead of favoring welfare relationships. Now she's phrasing it as a question. So let's phrase that as a question. How do you focus on the creation of capabilities in our communities rather than the I give to you welfare relationship? And then the next one, before you answer that one, is a good point is that the engaged university needs to be contextualized within, well, Isabella's saying within the country, but I think it's also within the university context. So the first one is about how do we focus on the creation of the capabilities, and the second one is the context. Where do we draw the line on the context? Is it country? Is it area? How do we do it? Over to you, Jose.
So I think in terms of the first one, in terms of the creation of capabilities in our communities, instead of favoring welfare relationships, I think it's important that we talk about, when we talk about disengaged universities, the power dynamic between universities and communities. And that is where I speak about co-creation, that we should be talking about co-creation in terms of what we are doing, rather than us as the university coming with all the answers to communities. They actually have answers within themselves. The other question around being contextualized, because each country is different. And therefore, I think when for us as a university, what we have done is to look at the overlaps between what is the National Development Plan, for example, for our country, what is Agenda 2063 saying, and what is SDG 2030 saying. And so what are the overlaps between those 3 things, and how can we address it in our context?
True. There's another interesting comment. It came from Grace, and she's saying, what about how do these contexts influence each other? And I think that's the nature of what we're trying to achieve today. How do these different contexts positively impact on each other, and are there strategies to do that?
Well, I think we're trying to find the answers to that. We don't have all the answers. And I'm not going to sit here this afternoon and profess to have all the answers. But I think that's part of the engagement. And as we listen to each other, we will find what different regions are using as best practice and what we can take out of that to apply to our context.
Jose, I'm going to thank you very much for your presentation. As you were speaking, when you said it's the co-producing of knowledge, you know what I thought you said? It's working with, not for the community. That's what I realized co-production actually means. It's not working for, it's working with. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm going to introduce the next speaker and then we'll ask you back again at the end. I'm going to leave this question, Anne, that you're raising here until the end. I will allow for that later. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Jose. Colleagues, it's now my pleasure to introduce the next two speakers. That will be Andre and Ellen. They will do a joint presentation. My understanding is that Andre will do the presentation. Thank you, Andre, you're there. And then we will take comments afterwards. Over to you, Andre.
Yes. Do you see my slides?
Perfect. Thank you. You may go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very, very pleased to be here with all of you. And I would like to apologize on behalf of Ellen Hazelcorn, with whom I have prepared this presentation, but couldn't be with us. I'm going to try to be as concise as possible because Jose has already talked about a number of things that I was going to address. But I will do so from a European point of view, with the caveat that Europe is a very diverse region with different higher education systems that where the autonomy and the level of funding, the degree of autonomy and the level of funding varies tremendously. And this affects teaching, learning, and social engagement. So my presentation today is structured as follows. I will talk first about what we mean by engagement. Then I will talk about how to engage and how to strategically engage, and then the policy implications. So first, what do we mean by engagement? By way of introduction, it's good to remember that universities historically have had a strong relationship with their communities. Over the centuries, they have served very well their society, particularly through their teaching mission. But today, the societal challenges require collective and coordinated engagement. And the major question now has shifted from not simply what universities are good at, but what they are good for. So this is where the concept of engagement becomes so important. What is then engagement? In our view, engagement is about engaging in learning beyond the campus walls, discovery which is useful beyond the academic community, and service that directly benefits the public. In other words, it's dissolving the concept of the ivory tower, which, by the way, was when this concept was invented, was seen as a very positive concept because it insulated the academic community from being politicized or biased by the society around it. And now those walls have dissolved to a certain extent. And there are three important points to make in that respect. First of all, it's about mutually beneficial engagement that promotes and embeds partnerships with the community, with industry and government in co-production of knowledge, because complex problems require collaborative solutions. It represents a shift from what was previously spontaneous and ad hoc into something which is now formal, planned, and structured, and as Jose was saying, at the core of the university strategy. And it requires policymakers, higher education institutions, and stakeholders to embrace a strategic approach to this area. I will miss this slide and get to that that slide, which presents the underpinning, if you want, the philosophical underpinning of engagement. there are three broad schools of thoughts or perspective. And I think the first one was well illustrated by our first speaker. It's about social justice. It emphasizes the education's responsibility and the societal duties of the university. It is about making a difference in the life of communities. It often focuses on student involvement, active learning, access, diversity, and inclusion. The second school of thought, which we saw dominating in Europe for quite a while, but I think now is on the wane perhaps a little bit. It's about the entrepreneurial university. It is an engagement that stresses economic development. It stresses higher education as a driver of social and economic growth, and it focuses on research development and innovation and commercialization of research. And the public good, which is perhaps where we're getting at now in Europe, and which is embodied in the notion of the civic university. It is rooted in ideas of co-production of knowledge and focuses on engagement as the horizontal link between teaching and research. And I will come back to this a bit later on. For now, I wanted to turn our attention to how we engage and to the notion of a strategic engagement. My first two slides are about two universities that engage holistically in their communities, but I want to stress in the first university, the University of Rovira Virgili in Catalonia, their engagement through their curriculum. So it is about their teaching offer, but not only, it's also about pedagogical approaches, and it is about responding to the workforce needs of the region and understanding what the region needs in terms of skills and employability. The second example comes from France. It is the Aix-Marseille University, and what it tried to do to respond to societal challenges, which are transdisciplinary in nature and require rather a transdisciplinary solution. So they have created 18 interdisciplinary institutes that are to promote this commitment and are asking those institutes to do research and to engage in economically, culturally with the society around them. It is a university that is seeking to model good employment and commitment to the SDGs. So when we look at the progression across Europe, what we see is universities that start out by engaging in a small scale, in discrete activities, outreach, extension, service learning, and so on. And slowly, as this is maturing, it becomes, it embeds social engagement as a core value of the university strategy. And the best way to visualize this is through this diagram, where in the first, on the left is the traditional is a traditional view of the missions of the universities and looking at engagement as a third pillar, to a view of engagement as a transversal axis that brings together and that links teaching and research. And I want to draw your attention to one of the resources that we have that we are recommending for you to read, which is a transatlantic dialogue that was organized by the European University Association, that provides a number of ways that universities are linking teaching, research, and engagement through their activities. So very quickly now, engaging with whom? This is of course very contextual, but usually includes civil society organizations, including non-governmental organizations, public and regional authorities, business sector and industry, citizen at large. And then a reflection on what what does the community represent? I mean, where do you draw the lines? Where do you draw the boundaries of your community? And should we be using communities in the plural? There are many examples of universities that are now using the internet and the capacity to engage at a distance to enlarge their engagement internationally. And in terms of looking at this whole area, what we see is also, we've seen now a progression where we have asked, where the universities were asked to define their profile either as a local, a regional, national, or international. And then for a while, they were seeking to balance and complement all those things. And then the rankings arrived and everybody was trying to be world class. I think we are now reverting to universities that are looking at themselves as placemaking institutions that are localized, but still using the internet and the international relations to enrich what they do locally. Now, what does this mean in terms of policies? At the institutional level, I'm not going to go through this whole slide, but just looking at, for instance, the first column, which is, or the second column, which represents how you put together a social justice agenda in this area. Usually, typically, you will have a vice president for student affairs and engagement, organizational units that include access and social inclusion, teaching and learning to support staff development and students, adult and community education. And then in terms of institutional activities, students working and with faculty on research to solve community issues, forming a community development council to work, for instance, on revitalization plans. Lessons learned from all this experience is first, and I think the most important lesson for me, particularly looking at Europe, but not only, is that in order to engage effectively, there is a shift from top-down regulation to new models involving greater institutional autonomy, shared governance, and public value management. And this is because ministries cannot steer engagement centrally. It has to be localized, and it has to be in the hands of the university. And then other lessons is that there is leadership capacity is required across all partners, whether they are universities, industry, or governments. Different parts of the educational system have the capacity, should have the capacity to collaborate through joint projects and sharing facilities. And we see that in a lot of different systems, whether they are really big countries or smaller countries. In the big countries, it would be at the regional level where they bring together clusters of education and research institutions, industry to work on common problems. And one very important point for developing economies is to build absorptive capacity in the local economy. Otherwise, we'll be forming training students who have nowhere to go. So in other words, success depends on comprehensive, well-coordinated set of strategies across a range of public services. And I'll stop here so that we don't run too much behind, but you can look at the slides when they will be available. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Andre, very much. I saw a lot of comments just said this was fantastic. I appreciate this to you and your colleague. I also know that there's a book that is one of the reference sources for this project available in our online repository. So if anyone is interested in that, they can go look at that. So I'm looking at questions. Here's an interesting one for you, Andre. Carol says, in your opinion, what are the factors that can hinder the realization of university commitment? What are the factors that can hinder the realization of?
Yes, right. Very good question. As I mentioned, it's autonomy, it is funding, But I can think, for instance, of a university in the former Yugoslavia who just after the Yugoslav war were with very limited resources and a very difficult political context, engage with their stakeholders. So you don't need a whole lot of means to be able to engage, but you certainly need to have elbow room to be able to go in and do things. I would also mention promotion criteria for faculty. And making the whole campus community understand the value of engagement and how much everybody can learn from it. Actually, not only the community, it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. And one of the best examples of this, or I think two sectors where you see this very clearly, is in agriculture and in medicine. Those disciplines have learned now to engage with their end users in a way that I think holds great promises and great lessons for all of us. But it is really to make the faculty understand that their social impact is important for their career.
You know, as I was listening to you from my perspective, what struck me were a couple of things. When you opened your discussion, your first slide, you spoke about what is a university good for versus good at. And you know, that sort of gave me, so where are the universities that I'm familiar with between what are they good at and what are they good for? And the answer for the good for lies in the extent of engagement.
Yes.
And then what spoke to me, and I would actually like your comment about that, is something that I thought when I was listening, I was like, so how do we do this? And then you said something amazing. You said activities first. I wrote that down for myself, activities first. So I was like, how do you get the culture of the university to change? And your sentence was activities first, i.e., it's the slow grinding down of the world to change from within, because there's activity first, we can see it. Do you want to expand on that?
You know, one thing I think that I'd like to say is that I would be listening to the students as a leverage for change, because our students today are extremely concerned by the state of the world. Whether it is about the environmental crisis or about other things. I mean, what we're seeing right now, I'm actually currently in New York City, a few blocks away from Columbia University. And the students are engaging, and you've got to be able to give a response. The active learning also is a great way of making the faculty get into the swing of things, as it were, to understand that if you to understand the benefit of getting your students out there in the community doing things with the community, to learn about, to develop their own skills in their own discipline. I think all those things are good places to start. I don't know if I've answered your question, but.
Thank you. I'm going to read you some of the questions that I see in front of me. Yeah. And one is actually one that I was going to ask you. So thank you, Dolores, for asking that. She says she doesn't quite understand what you mean by placemaking institutions. We're talking about the rankings, the world-classness, you remember? Yeah. And you spoke about placemaking institutions.
That's right.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Yes. Well, I remember one university president from a very from the Baltic states. You know, those are really small countries, and that have been very aggressive in placing their universities in the rankings. And they realized that they lost their community behind them. The community was saying, why do we care? Why do we care that you are, you know, number one or whatever they were? how is it going to benefit us? And we need to be able to answer that question.
Mm.
How are we going to be benefiting our local communities?
Mm.
The higher education is a service. It is a service to the students. It is a service to the communities, whether it's the local, regional, national community or international community, but it is a service. It is not about us being number one.
So on that, Brenna's asking, are there constraints towards working in international engagement or local engagement for that matter? What's holding us back?
I'm going to be maybe to offend some people, but there is a book that was written that was published a few months ago that's called "Whatever It Is, I'm Against It." And it is about higher education, and it is about resistance to change. We need to contaminate. I had once the privilege of talking to a university president who was a virologist. And he said virology was the model for him of how he contaminated the university to make changes. He would get one or two champions in lots of little corners of his university to make sure that people were going to be contaminated by the change. You need to be able to lead the community, your community. And I think that's absolutely fundamental and really needed, but it's not easy. It's not easy because there is lots of resistance. There are academic tribes, there are promotions, people wanting to be recognized by their peers that are not necessarily in their community, whether in the university community or outside, in the local community. What counts is whoever is at Harvard or Yale, that type of thing. This is what needs to change. And this is the value of this seminar, that you're bringing all the, everyone together from different corners of the world. I mean, it's really fantastic.
I do need to go over the time because you got to hear this one. This comes from Paulo. Paulo says Latin America is at the forefront of a large debate on the extension of the university in terms of how the challenges of designing innovative solutions to societal needs is addressed. Can you elaborate on that? He says, is that what you mean?
Sorry, I got distracted here.
All right, I'll read it for you again.
Yeah.
Latin America is at the forefront of a large debate on the extension of the university in terms of how the challenges of designing innovative solutions to societal needs is addressed. Do you want to comment about that?
Yes. Yes, and this is, for instance, the example of Aix-Marseille, the University Aix-Marseille. What they have, and I hope that they have this in English on their website, but those institutes that I spoke about are supposed to bring together interdisciplinary teams to talk about specific issues. And they have to have, as part of their remit, a teaching component at least at the master and the doctoral level, if not only at the undergraduate level. They need to have an aspect of engagement and transfer of knowledge to society. And it's not only about commercialization of research. So this is becoming, I think, a trend in Europe, and a very important one. So I would urge the person who answered the question to look at, for instance, the Aix-Marseille website to see if they can cull some information from there.
Thank you so much for engaging with us. It was a very interesting discussion, and I can see how the flow of this, from our first speaker through to the two of you, actually go according to the same journey. So hopefully we'll see by the end where the journey is going. Thank you very much. I'm going to introduce
Thank
the
you.
next speaker, and then we'll get back to you later on. So, Elizabeth, I'm inviting you to the floor. Professor Kambua,
Yes, hi, Renee, thank you.
over to you and welcome here.
Hello, here is morning today from Colombia, but I'm very happy to be here. Thanks to the organizers, Sobreal and Saura, and of course the participants of this webinar. I am here to present, of course, to answer the question about what is the engaged university and why is this model important to discuss interregional. But since my place in the Colombian Association of Universities, I want to share with you, this is an association that joined private and public universities in all of the regions, also regions of our country. And in this moment, we are also we have the presidency of the Latin American Caribbean Higher Education Space, ENLACES, and we recently participated in the regional conference in higher education to follow up we named CRES Plus 5 because we had regional conference about our higher educations in 2018, and we want, and with the leadership with the Brazil government, we want to know, well, what happened in our region 5 years after these big goals that we agree in that moment. So for this conference, we make different groups and we analyze different topics. And the topic that I participate analyzing is the strategic role of higher education in the sustainable development of Latin America in the Caribbean, that it's directly involved with this topic. They engage with the universities. In this work, more than 100 people participated in the virtual public consultation, as well as the preparatory meetings in Argentina, Mexico, Paraguay, Cuba, and finally in Brazil. So I want to share with you some of the reflections that we have already about this topic. The first thing is the definition of sustainable development, no? So we want to, with the people who join in this reflection, we want to talk about, okay, what are we understanding about sustainability and about sustainable development? Are we talking about the same thing, or are differences between us that we need to consider in order to know how to improve the role of the higher education in these terms? So we have a consensus that all of we know about that, about thinking the sustainability in these intergenerational alliances between current societies and future generations. No, that was the consensus of this work. But we know that it's very important avoid standardization and the limitation in a single and immutable definition. Some people say we need to include restoration about this topic. And there was also a very important reflection about what is, if we're thinking about a strategic role in higher education institutions, what is strategic? Because all of our universities are doing a lot of things, some of them isolated, no? So how we can improve a really strategic role. So we define this strategic role about some of you talk about this before: planned visions and long-term purposes, deliberate directions, and the importance of that generate leadership, links, alliances, and cooperation between different actors, sectors, and environment. and consolidate the higher education as the main vector of change, innovation, and sustainability. This is important for us because for some governments, the higher education institutions are important, but not strategically important. No? So some governments say, okay, the universities can collaborate in some, for example, some SDG or some areas, but not all of our governments understand our real strategic role. So in this study, we are looking for some achievements in the last 5 years. Like the idea is to answer, okay, how we are doing in the strategic role in higher education in sustainable development. And we analyze commitments and realities after these 5 years. So some achievements, I will talk very quickly about this, but we found that the relationship between sustainability and higher education is consolidated in these 5 years. We also achieved the explicit commitments of governments in Latin America and Caribbean. We can saw the business and some very important actors in business sector committed to action and adoption of standards in this compromise. The incorporation in evaluation and accreditation of quality agencies and in rankings also, as you talked before about rankings, but the things that we found in this study is that the ways in some agencies and rankings are changing. Their criteria are changing also the universities. So if there's some quality of agencies ask for more engagement and validate that engagement in their criteria, that improve the action itself of the institutions. And we found that there are changing in this, there are important changes in this topic. Okay, there are statements, instruments, and public repositories about these things. Important networks, for example, the Ibero-American Network of University for Sustainability and the Environment, IRUSA, that in this moment have 29 networks with more of 500 higher education institutions. We found more empowerment processes in civil society, developments in the concept of sustainable development, the Agenda 2030 and SDGs like as an obligatory references, and the opportunity of globally outstanding in Latin American and Caribbean leadership in some topics. But we also found some challenges in this way. What challenges we found? The measurement, because we found a lot of objectives, goals, indicative strategies in the institutions, but not necessarily articulated. Some of the institutions has their own objectives and they are developing that objectives, but not in the synergic point of view or systemic point of view. We found a very important differences between country, a little control from the higher education institution in some goals. So some institutions say to us, well, we want to do some things, but we have a lot of control that restrained our actions. In that way, possible limitations to higher education institutions and the opacity in the systemic vision of sustainable development. And also we found them a challenge in the public perception of the strategic role of higher education in the sustainable development of Latin America and the Caribbean. So we found that some sectors in the society didn't know about what are the universities doing, contributing the development of their country. More people say, I don't know what the university is doing in this moment. I know that you do the same, you are doing, or you are making the same things like always. And we know that is not true. So we found that between our context between academics. We know that the universities are doing a lot of work, but not it's the same perception of some external sector of university. So in this study, we proposed some priorities to be considered at the regional level for the next 5 years in relation to the strategic role of higher education in sustainable development. So we propose in the work is all of the objectives are important, but we need to agree as a region some ways to make actions that improve our systems of higher education, not just our institutions isolated, also our systems. So the first priority is encourage critical and constructive self-assessment of higher education institutions tied to roots for their transformation. So our institutions say, okay, we know that we need to transform some things in our institutions. So one priority needs to be how to go through the transformation and how we support the institutions through that transformation. We have here 12 areas to work with institutions in order to improve their transformation or to support their transformation related with autonomy, governance, policies, and implementation of the policies, sustainable management, social protagonism, and public exemplarity of these institutions, internal quality assurance and promotion related with this point of view, innovation, responsible and sustainable research function, revitalization of the third function, some of our institutions named extension or transfer, or as you said before, community service, engagement, and the same kind of terms. Moving from palliative well-being to comprehensive and central well-being in institutions, internationalization for sustainability, strategic and sustainable partnerships, supported with focus in supporting youth, and improve the influence of higher education institutions in public policies. The second priority that we recommend to do in these 5 years in our region is redefine the measurement and monitoring of higher education strategic role in sustainable development in the remaining 5 years of this conference. So I have here the phrase attributed to Galileo Galilei. This phrase says, the key is not to measure everything that is measurable, but to make measurable everything that is worth measuring. So the analysis that we did in this moment is that we can say that for this engagement, we have 3 types of measurement: follow-up to management, follow-up to results or achievements, and monitoring of change, transformation, or impacts. So as we saw, we have a lot of reports of our higher education institution of our countries about what they are doing. And this is good. They say we have these programs, these projects, groups, alliances, etc. This is very important, but it is like the first level of measurements, because after that, we need to follow out the results. Okay, what we can achieve with that programs, with that projects, no? What can we see with our graduates, or how we can measure the skills that we really improve, or transfer of knowledge, effectively, innovation, etc. And the next level is how can we monitoring of change, transformation, or impact in both ways. In higher education, how can we monitoring the transformation in our institution, and also how can we have this measure out in the problems to which it's seeking to contribute. No, so for example, we do a lot of things trying to deal with poverty, but what is the kind of measure that could say to us that our action is in fact changing the situation? No. And also, it's very important to define areas of application of monitoring. We have here some ideas and sources of information and regional leadership. It's not just to have a lot of information. It's to define what kind of information is that we need. And the third and the last priority that we recommend to our region is send clear and forceful messages from higher education to other sectors that are fundamental to the sustainable development of Latin America and the Caribbean. This is or some sector that we need to give a message about the co-responsibility in this in this engage. So, for example, of course, states and governments, quality agencies, international organizations, national and international university associations and higher education networks, external sector and influential actors, the youth and the society. We have some topics that we need to include in the messages from each of one of these actors in the way or in order to, as I said, ratification of co-responsibility. It's important from us, from higher education institutions, to say to other actors, okay, we are in our, we are doing our best efforts and show how our efforts are contributing, but also to say the other actors, we need you to do things synergically in order to have major impacts in our actions. Well, for the end of this presentation, my questions for the participants is, and if we make progress on these priorities and the dialogue between African and Latin American and the Caribbean, I want to hear from you also if those will be the priorities in higher education institutions in Latin America in order to have a major strategic role. Okay, in Africa, could you see the same priorities, or what is the principal differences? So that's it. I'm grateful for this invitation, for your contributions, and for your participation in this process. We have I think that we have the need and also the opportunity to move forward together in common challenges. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate this. Would you mind putting your PowerPoint back up on that question in red that you asked? Sorry to do this to you. Your second last slide where you actually asked a question.
Yes, yes.
All right,
Because let me put again, please.
So
here.
while she's doing that, which she didn't expect from me, so apologies, Elizabeth.
No, don't worry, don't worry.
Doing that, I would like
share.
all of you, just by a show of hands in Zoom, it's the second last slide. The one where you ask your question in red.
This
There we
one?
go. There you go. So I just want you all in your Zoom, just raise your hand there. So you're asking a question. Do you think that what was presented here can be useful? It's the same in your world of work where you are. Yes? Put up your hand in Zoom and say, yeah, what has just been presented in your situation, Elizabeth, is relevant to mine, because I think you spoke to all of us. So I would like to see it so. If I could, I would raise my hand now and say, yeah, this speaks to me. So who says? I see 9 hands. I think what you've just done is to explain almost the theory of everything to all of us from your study that you conducted. So I thank you very much for what you did. So I see hands going up still. Yeah, you all agree what you presented is true for all of us. So you've just done the extraordinary to show us how we can engage on this. Thank you, Elizabeth. So when you started talking, I wrote down for myself a little diagram that said there's commitment. So we say the words, and then there's reality. Then we have to live the words. And there's obviously a huge gap between our commitment and our reality. And then there was a question earlier on in the question and answer that talks to, while in South Africa it's very political, so how do we implement something in terms of culture change when politics may stand in your way? So all of this talks to what Elizabeth presented here, I think, which is commitment, reality, and measuring impact between all of this. I think that's what I heard. And I thought this was really exciting. And then before she even showed Galileo, what came to mind in your presentation, Elizabeth, was I was watching my grandson on Sunday trying to crawl on the lawn. Now, here's a 7, 8 months old baby lying flat on his stomach, and he's making a lot of movements. It looks like a fish going up and down this way and that way, but there's no movement. He's expanding so much energy trying to move from position A to position A. It was frightful to watch. And then you showed Galileo's, what should we be measuring? Because a lot of the questions I've seen here today talks to how do we measure? What do we measure and how do we measure that? So that we get from the talk to the action. And I think you've grabbed that very well. You had a slide where you spoke about the challenges. So I want to ask you one question, and maybe it's unfair to you, but what would be from the slide you presented a list? What would you think is the biggest challenge? Elizabeth, am I putting you on the spot, or does something come to mind? This is really the challenge.
Yes, we thought that the big challenge, it's also related with the strategic role and the systemic point of view. For example, as we saw in Colombia, we have each university in Colombia are making their efforts, and we have a huge of reports of all the things that that university are doing. But how to articulate the work of that university with other universities and with other sectors, I think is the major challenge, because all of us knew about the importance of articulate actions, but when you want to do effectively, there are a lot of limits of that. For example, what is the financial thing, no? Who have the budget, and who manage the budget, and who take the decision after all, and who sustain the action after you start the action, and who benefit with that. So some things that we when we really start a project or something like that, thinking in a long term, it's a very difficult decisions to make, and I think it's still the big challenge, how to articulate different universities, different sectors in a long way term. I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. And that talks, Anna says it very well, internationalization for sustainability, really. That was Anna's comment just now, internationalization for sustainability, which is a completely different kettle of fish, I presume.
Yes, because we talk also about like the movement of internationalization. At the first, internationalization for our institutions are more mobility of students, then of teachers, nowadays of. After that, we start with cooperation, academic cooperation and scientific cooperation through internationalization. But we thought that we need to start the third step, and it's yes, mobility and yes, cooperation, but we need to know with what focus. It is not mobilization for itself, no? The mobilization is not the end. It's for what we want to do that mobilization, for what we need to do that cooperation. So that is internationalization for sustainability, is when we do this kind of action and dialogues and mobility and cooperation, but thinking in our common objective related with sustainability and related with these big goals that we need to have as humanity. It's something like that.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you a last question. It comes from a question that I just saw here. So the strategy which you mentioned is about the end game. So you've got to have a picture in your head. This is what it will look like in the end. And then the question here in the chat now was, but what about the journey to get to that end game? He phrased it as the process towards that end game. What goes wrong or right in that process, which is our pathway to get to that end game? What do you think in this? What can go wrong? How do you look at the process rather than just the end game, the beautiful picture, and maybe it's attainable or not? What do you think?
Well, I think it's very important to realize the diversity of situation in our higher education institution, because sometimes we hear with our professors and managers of our institution that say, okay, everything say to us what we need to do, but not all the people are supporting us with the process, no? As you said. So we need to first understand what is the situation of our higher education institution in this moment, and how can we support the institution? Because in this moment, I don't know if in Africa it's the same. In Latin America, we have a lot of control about our higher education institution. That is fine, but all of or the majority of our governments are controlling, but not in the same way are supporting the institutions. So I think we need to realize that what are our present situations and how to support the institutions for that change that we know that we need to do. I don't know if I answered the question.
You did.
More or less.
You
Okay.
actually did. Thank you. It also reminded me of what Andres said that spoke to me, and that is that it's small steps, it's small activities. Don't be discouraged because there's a big thing that you want to achieve and you don't know how to get to that end game. Then it's the activities that count, because that changes the way in which the journey can take place. I wish to thank you very much for a very valuable presentation. I think your research is well presented here and well understood and very useful. I almost said to the congregation, but to the group in this meeting today. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Please
Thank
don't
you.
go away. I'm going to invite the remainder of the panel to join us here. And then we will conclude by taking some more general questions. I know, Jose, that she has some problems with connectivity, but I would like to invite all the speakers to switch on their cameras, all three, and just remain active. And I'm going to just check whether there are any additional questions. Don't see any. So while I'm waiting for more questions, we have two very large, big value, I think, questions, yeah, that I would like the panel to discuss. And then we'll see whether we can reach some mental model of how this works for us as a takeaway when we close in about 20 minutes time. The first question, which is a big one, how can our policies be shaped to support the engaged university concept and ensure that it can work? And are we using the right words when we want to talk to the policymakers? How would we get them to agree with us? What terminology should be used? What would be the cell language of this? And I remember Jose was talking about the CHE conference in 2022. So are there existing enabling policies? So before we get to the future, just the current state, let's talk with the panelists. How can higher education policies help shape a support to an engaged university model and be sure that it can work? And what terminology should be used to get the policymakers to come and listen to us? Any one of the speakers, please. Jose will forgive you if you don't show your video and you can just share your knowledge with us. Andre?
Yeah, right. I can attempt
Please.
to respond to this. I would say that the right terminology is certainly a very, very good point to make here. And what the policymakers are going to be sensitive to is benefit and impact. And in Europe, at least, there are lots of universities now, and also conferences, associations, national associations of universities that are doing impact studies to show how what are the return on higher education. I would also mention quality assurance. I know at some point one of the participants asked a question about whether quality assurance should look at engagement. And I would say the answer is yes. The answer is yes, because we shouldn't be seeing engagement, as I said, as a third pillar, but really as a transversal axis that cuts across. If we are looking at, for instance, active learning, then we're looking also at that aspect of engagement. If you are evaluating research, you are looking at the impact of research. So yes, I would say it's essential that quality assurance frameworks take into account the concept of engagement.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you. Do you think that will talk to the correct terminologies then to attract the policymakers?
I think it will make it more visible, and it will demonstrate what the universities are doing. I mean, no, I was the chair of the quality board in Iceland when we were looking basically at teaching. And when I arrived there, I started talking to all the university presidents and realized that they were all very engaged in their society, that Iceland had the highest rate of citizens' trust in university research. And I was very intrigued that this didn't show up in our evaluations.
No.
So the next framework is now including a component on engagement.
That's wonderful to hear. Elizabeth, do you have some sense of what we can use here? How can education policies be shaped towards the engaged university and make it work?
Yes, what we recommend to our university is to understand the national plans, the national development plans of our governments. Because when you understand the big idea of our governments, you can include the actions of the universities in that big plan. So in that case, you can use the same terms that are using for the policymakers in order to include the goals of the universities in the same language. No, so if it sometimes it's not two different languages, it's like how we put our goals. So if we say, okay, we have our goals, and we need that you as government or other, you need to, or you are or you have to support, because we are a university. It's different if you say, if you can say that our university can't develop your plan, and we are a very strategic actor to develop your plan, in that case, we can work more or influence in a better way the public policy. Is one of things that we suggest to our institutions.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I've just seen a very interesting comment made by Brightness. Thank you, Brightness, for that. Brightness is saying, but if we talk about policy, we talk about the university and creating its policies, and then we're wanting the government to present at the government level policies. But where's the co-creation of the policies? Thank you, Brightness, for that, because it's a really good point. We're talking about the engaged university, so we're talking about developing policies for this, and Brightness's comment is, but shouldn't we be co-creating those policies, because they're all about co-production? Thank you for that. What would you say about that? Will that work? If our stakeholders, our communities participate in the development of the policies that are inherently about them, is that possible? Andre, Elizabeth?
Yes, you know, there are different ways of doing this. There is, you can think about how you bring your community within the university walls to discuss about issues, or go toward the communities to discuss issues. I just wanted to talk about a very moving experience I had in Ghana last year, where an institute in genetics bought a bus to go around villages in Ghana to test women for breast cancer. And what they did was, the first step was to go and talk to the village chiefs, to make them understand and to talk to them about their culture and how they can approach the women in that community. So there are things that, with a bit of imagination and limited resources. Those were limited resources. It was a bus, but it was a very colorful bus with pictures, on the outside and so on, to make people draw their attention to this and talk to them about what their issues are.
Yes, I think that it's a very important point, because we can, when we work between intersectors or inter-institutions, sometimes we found that different institutions are making the same thing, are not working as a system, no? With a different functions and complementary functions. So it's like everything want to do a lot of things, and when that happens, you can lose the particularity of each participation. So I think that, as Arma said, it's very important. The first one, what is the focus or the problem, or something that integrate or articulate different actors. And it's very important since the beginning talk about what is the role of each institution of person, because if that is if you can manifest or you can identify how it's each role, you can make a better work, a complementary work. If that is not clear, different institutions or different persons finally could be made the same action. And that is not good for the impact that we want to have with this kind of approach. The idea is not what the thing is not a lot of things doing. The important thing is, I know that some people say it's the process is important, not just the results. Yes, but the results are important. No, so it's important how to each person, how each institution collaborate with a big results.
And Elizabeth, you've just taken us into my second question. You're providing me with a line to the second question because you brought in the systems perspective, which is that all these things are connected. So from your systems perspective, which means we got to look at all the agents that impact on the system and bring them all in. Brightness was talking about the co-creation of the policies, and then you two were discussing, so where does that take us? And you brought in the system. So from that perspective, moving forward, what should be the future directions for the concept of the engaged university? And we brought in climate change already and sustainability. What should be the future directions for engaged university? Where can it go? How can it help? Jose, if you're there, just let me know and I can even include you in the chat. So to any of the facilitators, what are the future directions for the concept of engaged university? There's climate change, there's the sense of inequality, all the SDGs need to help to alleviate poverty, get education better, provide food. I think technology could become a threat. The world population growth might be a threat. So with all of that, what are the future directions for the engaged university?
If I may, Renee?
Please
Yeah.
go ahead.
In Europe, these issues have been at the forefront for now, maybe about at least 10 years, through funding from the European Union. They were funding research that addressed big challenges. They also funded an initiative called the University Alliance Initiative, where a few universities get together to work on research and joint teaching and learning projects. And many of those universities are focused on those kinds of challenges. And when I saw your question, the first thing that came to mind actually was the example of one university, actually the Sorbonne University in France, where their VP for international is also the VP for engagement. So I could imagine a VP for international also dealing with those kinds of issues. And he saw very much his role and the fact that he had too big portfolio to address as an opportunity to have to establish synergies and find international partnerships to address issues such as climate change and the SDGs and so on.
So what is relevant, which was Anne's comment now, is the extent to which governments have bought into this concept. So from question 1 to question 2 here, we're talking about the future of the engaged university, but we're leaving out that stakeholder that is the government. And we still need that convincing to happen. So we need to get our words right. Jose?
Yes. Yeah, and if I may, just very quickly, as part of this African project that I was talking about, there was the example of one country in Africa where the government was funding institutes, centers for excellence in very important on very important subjects for the nation, but whenever they needed expertise, they turned to international experts. So I think it really is important for the governments to also know what's happening in the universities, the
Good
good
point.
things that are happening.
Yeah, they should come and see us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jose?
Yeah, I wanted to say that in my presentation, when I presented, I said that South African government has tried to incorporate some form of engagement into their policy. The challenge we have is how do we operationalize what has been in there? And I think for us, it's about how do we engage, and I want to agree with Brightness, is how do we bring them to the table to engage us as institutions to be able to contribute to driving. Well, we need to help them understand that we're actually driving their own agenda for them through the work that we do, so that it becomes a collaborative. So for me, I think it's important that we do bring them to the table. Just recently through our university, we had what we called an SDG Indaba, and we invited government to come and present at the Indaba to share their ideas, and then have our researchers bring together their information. And so we tap on and Elizabeth mentioned that we're needing to align our policies to the national development plans of our countries in terms of bringing that, together. And so I think it's important that we emphasize the local as well as the global, so that we understand that what we are trying to achieve through this Engage University is to make a difference in the local, but also on the global narrative. And that then brings us to your second question in terms of what are the future directions for the Engage University concept. And I think it's the concepts can be broad, but I think the context is going to be guiding where the conversation would go in terms of what we're wanting to achieve and how we're wanting to achieve this Engage University.
Thanks, Jose. Elizabeth, any last comment from you before I summarize what I've learned?
Yes, I think we need to in that question, I think we need to identify and classify the capacities and needs of our institutions in order to respond to this concept of Engage University. Because I think that if we have this broad picture about our institutions, we can decide what we can do for institutions and what can the institutions do for our countries. No, so if it's not just yes, to promote the concept, it's very important, but also to identify, to classify, to have the better characterizations of our institutions in the way to have, for example, in since our role as association, how can we improve the institutions in way to have the better environment that the institution for that institutions to achieve their goals.
Very
Yes.
true. Thank you. So I'll do a brief summary of what spoke to me, and hopefully that would help you towards your own takeaway for today. The session really was about what is the Engaged University. So introducing the series by starting our discussion around Engaged University. And in achieving that, we focused on definitions of what is engagement, what is strategic engagement, and then what is the Engaged University. That took us into the word C-O, which is co-production, co-creation, working together. That took us into collaborations, a lot of collaborations, different ones. Then we spoke about if this is what we're wanting to achieve, and this is what we're doing, how do we measure impact? And some of Andre's examples spoke to, there are ways to measure impact. We may not be that successful because we may be measuring the wrong things, but there are ways to measure impact. Then Elizabeth took us through almost a case study of how they have unpacked all of this and what their understanding about how this can work is going forward. And we seem to be agreeing that that is the way forward, that that's good for us all to listen to and to agree. The thing is, without any of these activities and bringing in all the partners, which includes government, civil society, business, academia, without these and then providing a sense of working together, we probably won't reach an answer. And the universities tend to be isolated islands and forget what's around them because in the past, as Andre pointed out, they were systems that lived within society. And then we lost it because of world-classness, I like the word, Andre, and becoming placing institutions. So if we go back to what the engaged university is, let's pull that concept in its place within our own context. And then by the next event, which I've put on the screen, we will go towards incorporating that engagement into our institutional strategy. And one of the questions that I didn't do was developing effective M&E systems for that engagement. So the person who asked that question, that will still come. And then in the third webinar, we'll talk to higher education innovation and the quintuple and quadruple helix models towards knowledge co-production. We'll deal with internationalization and capacity building for local engagement, and then enabling engaged universities for development, and that will take us into a multi-regional policy. So mark the dates, please. From my side, I wish to thank firstly the facilitators for excellent engagements, for riveting discussions, for making it easy to listen and to absorb the knowledge that they shared with us. Then I wish to thank every one of the participants for the questions, the comments that you posed, for being here. And by that, understanding and agreeing that we need to become more engaged as the universities. Now, my last words might be negative, and that is that I see universities from the perspective of a book I read many years ago, teaching the elephant to dance. And I would be inviting every one of you to help us dance the universities to becoming more engaged. With that, I thank you from my side, and I hand back to Kibrume and Marina. Thank you very much, and goodbye from my side. Back to Marina and Kibrume.
On behalf of Marina and Aurel and all the organizing team, I would like to thank the speakers as well as the participants for this informative and very engaged conversation. I hope we'll meet again for the second session, which is on the 17th, as Renee informed us. Thank you all. Have a good day.